Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Tales to Astonish 40, cover dated February of 1963. This issue marks the first appearance of obscure villain the Hijacker, and was written by Stan Lee and Larry Lieber, drawn by Jack Kirby, inked by Saul Brodsky, and lettered by Art Simic. Our issue opens up with a striking splash page, teasing Ant-Man's coming battle with the wicked Hijacker. But before we can witness such an epic showdown, we must first travel to the laboratory of Dr. Hank Pym, who's just invented a new gas mask for the US Army. But just like that, the issue suddenly shifts focus to a pair of dazed guards who are staggering back to town. They'd been hired to protect an armored car, but have become yet another victim of the elusive Hijacker. Not much is known about the villain, except that he steals armored cars, and somehow wipes his heists from the memories of their guards. The one suffering the most from his crimes is Howard Mitchell, the owner of a transport service which is frequently targeted. He's just learned of the latest heist, and is on the verge of bankruptcy because of it. Both distraught and furious, he hopelessly remarks that only Ant-Man could possibly defeat the Hijacker. While Mitchell doesn't expect anything to come of the comment, it happens to be overheard by one of the hero's ants. This tiny insect is one of many in an elaborate crime alert system that Hank Pym monitors within his laboratory. Thus he's just learned of Mitchell's plea, and being the hero he is, races to help. So he changes into his Ant-Man costume, inhales his shrinking gas, and shoots himself out of the human cannon that takes him into the city. His fall is broken by a massive pile of ants, one of which he then climbs onto, and rides into Mitchell's office. Inside he greets the surprised businessman, and asks to know what's been going on. So Mitchell tells Ant-Man of the recent string of robberies carried out by the mysterious Hijacker, and how it's costing him business. Ant-Man realizes that the Hijacker may be working for Mitchell's competitors, who'd stand to gain if he went bankrupt. So he instructs Mitchell to publicly announce the transport of an armored car that's scheduled for the next day. In all likelihood, the Hijacker will show up to steal it, but he'll be waiting inside to ambush him. Mitchell agrees to this plan, and thus Ant-Man prepares to leave. But as he's on his way out, he notices that Mitchell has a small collection of Incan idols. The businessman explains that he'd gotten them during a recent trip to Peru, where he spent time with a group of jungle natives. Ant-Man thinks that they're rather neat, but nothing to linger on, so he leaves and the issue then shifts forward to the next day, as the bait car is being loaded with cash. Ant-Man and several guards are waiting to depart, while Mitchell is there to see them off. But just as their car is ready to go, Ant-Man is suddenly pierced by a sharp internal pain. He realizes that his appendix is about to burst, and is forced to abandon the ambush and head for the hospital. Knowing that they can't defeat the Hijacker without his help, the guards decide to call off the transport. But Mitchell overrides them, as he claims that he can't afford to lose another customer. So they reluctantly leave, and eventually find themselves on a rural road blocked by a large box truck. One guard assumes that it's just having car trouble, and thus offers help. But another realizes that it might be a sinister ploy to get them to leave their car. So they remain inside, and wait for the truck to make a move. And sure enough it does, as the back doors of its storage compartment suddenly slide open and reveal a massive magnet hidden within. Its attractive force yanks their car into the truck, at which point the sliding doors shut behind them. Thus it's obvious that they've been trapped by the Hijacker, who then tosses a gas grenade into the storage compartment. While the villain's protected by a gas mask, the guards are vulnerable to the fumes and are knocked out. With them out of the way, the Hijacker then retrieves a blowtorch and begins breaking into the armored car. But his heist is then suddenly interrupted by the unexpected arrival of Ant-Man. It's revealed that the hero had feigned his illness, as he knew that the Hijacker would be smart enough to see through his bait, and wouldn't come. Only if he pretended to be gravely sick, would the villain feel confident enough to attack. So when Ant-Man said he was leaving for the hospital, he'd actually left to board a model plane, one that he used to follow the armored car undetected. But when it stopped for the box truck, he realized that the guards were falling into the Hijacker's trap. So he hopped onto the car's roof, and when the Hijacker released his grenade, he put on his gas mask from earlier. That brings us back to the present, as an enraged Hijacker is desperately swiping at Ant-Man. But the tiny hero dodges the strikes by escaping into the armored car through a window slit. With no other way in, the Hijacker begins hurriedly burning through its reinforced doors. It only takes him a few seconds to do so, but that's enough time for Ant-Man to send out a distress call to any nearby ants. But it'll take time for them to arrive, so he'll have to survive the hijacker until they do. So he first hides in the car's ignition, but is spotted and nearly stabbed by the villain using its key. So he next flees into the engine, where he's safe for a few moments, until the hijacker begins blaring the car's horn. Its already loud noise is deafening to Ant-Man's tiny ears, and he's forced to rip out the wires that connect it to the engine. Thus the hijacker realizes that this ploy has failed, and in frustration, opens up the hood to personally crush Ant-Man. But the hero isn't in the engine anymore, he's now crawling onto a windshield wiper. While this might seem like an odd place to flee to, the wipers then suddenly turn on and fling Ant-Man onto the hijacker's mask. Of course the wipers didn't magically turn on their own, but were activated by a group of ants who'd arrived to help. Regardless, Ant-Man's now on the hijacker's mask, tearing it apart. The rips and cuts allow a small amount of sleeping gas to seep through, but it's enough to knock the villain unconscious. Thus Ant-Man has a chance to remove his mask, and reveal that the hijacker is none other than Howard Mitchell. But the hero isn't surprised, as he'd suspected that Mitchell was the villain from the beginning. In fact, the only reason he'd known to bring his gas mask was because of the businessman's Incan idols, which he recognized as belonging to a native culture that's known for making a memory loss-inducing vapor. But with that rather contrived explanation out of the way, the issue can subsequently end as the guards awakening apprehend Mitchell, who admits that he'd invented the hijacker persona to steal money and prop up his already failing business. That concludes the Ant-Man story in Tales to Astonish 40, and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was a boring and bland story. Its plot was practically identical to that of Tales to Astonish 37. Both involve aging businessmen who adopt evil personas, steal from their competitors, and then rob themselves to avoid suspicion. I'm honestly shocked that Marvel would so closely recycle a storyline only 2 issues after first using it. It's inexcusably lazy, and unbecoming of a company known for its ingenuity. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.